to the debate format, Graham.
Okay, so we've heard from the CSPs. Now we're going to hear about from the suppliers. We're back to the debate format. So it's 5 minutes. We've got 4 presentations for you. And the first one is from Avishai Sharlin from Amdocs. So Avishai, tell us a little bit about how you were helping CSPs with their cloud journey. Thank you very much.
So I need to speak for 5 minutes with no slides and not mentioning Amdocs, yeah? Okay, that will be a tough one. I think that when we've heard speaking about North Star, and when we look about the industry today, the answer is a straightforward one. The industry, if you look at the VC community, 90% of the investment today are in cloud native technology. 80% of the startups today are software as a service based, so the business is going to cloud native. So it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Now, having said that, I think that the industry matured from a puristic technological perspective into understanding that this journey may take a few years. I'll try to use maybe an analogy from children. And when you have your firstborn, and also and you are waiting for him to walk, you are encouraging him, even though he falls, and even though for the first few weeks he stumbles, because you understand that the end game is that he will need to walk and become part of the walking civilization. And you're not saying, let's look out of the window, maybe people are not walking. Everybody is walking. And this is what the situation we're in. Actually, if you look at the web scale companies, they are running. And again, going back to your child, the first thing you'll tell him is not, okay, start running. Let's start walking first. And then once you walk, I'll train you to run. But it's eminent that eventually you need to run. Same goes with our industry. You cannot avoid it by saying it will not happen. You need to play and become part of it. And this means change in almost every aspect we know. Now think about it. Many years ago, we talked about technology being a factor of doing business. The CEO would come to the CIO and we tell him, I have some business initiative. And then we were asking for tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions, in order to fulfill this, and it will take us 2 or 5 or 6 years to make it happen. In today's world, due to the fundamental change in automation and embracing those hyperscale web technologies, we are able to flip the coin. And technology today is an enabler to provide business agility. So the deeper we go into that journey, we are providing our companies with a means to do something that was not achievable only a few years back. Now, is it a black and white journey? Can we do it, in a split of a second? The answer is no. Do we need to change? Yes. We need to reskill our people. We need to change the tooling we're using. We need to change the software we're using. But we know that we need to go there because we want to play in the future digitized world. And we cannot stop it. And we cannot delay it. So it's a balance. It's not a black and white discussion. It's a process and a journey discussion. As long as we understand that we need to be there, not all of us started walking when we were 8 months or 9 months or a year. Not all of us started speaking the same time, but eventually we all speak. And eventually we all walk. And eventually some are running faster than the others, which is okay. This is human nature. And some will adapt to the cloud era faster than the others. But if we need to do something, we need to understand that we are going there. We need to understand that we need to change. And now it's a matter of balancing act between our ability to adopt agility, between our ability to adopt automation, and the need to move as fast as possible to become a valid player in the modern era. This is it for me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just take a seat over there for me. Leave one on the end free for Graham. I say diversity is everything we're trying to push here. I'd now like to welcome to the stage David Gordon from Cisco to talk about the way Cisco sees this and obviously come in a very different perspective. David.
Thank you. Is this on? Am I good? Yeah.
You're good.
That's frighteningly loud from here. The question that was posed was, where are we on the cloud journey? We've had a lot of good discussion so far. I'm going to broaden it just a hair to start with where are we, including the suppliers, on the cloud journey. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my company, but not in the salesy sense that you might expect. I'll share sort of the good and the warts. So from Cisco's standpoint, we play in the cloud space, or we're traveling to the cloud in a variety of ways. Right? So one is we provide software as a service type businesses, right? So we've been in WebEx and Meraki and Umbrella, which is our security product. And these have all started in different places. And WebEx was really a Web 1.0 kind of architecture. And we have fought and struggled our way towards making that a cloud-based, a true cloud architecture. And for us, as the guinea pigs inside, that's been a painful journey. We like to sell WebEx by talking about the productivity gains that people get. We joke internally about the productivity costs of, the first 10 minutes of the call getting lost to whatever bug has been introduced this week or this morning. We provide cloud technology into the enterprise, so we're watching enterprises go through this process. We provide cloud infrastructure, and we're moving our service provider products to cloud architectures from a packet core kind of standpoint for the service provider space. And we partner with and provide technology into the hyperscale providers. So we've got sort of a wide range of views here. And even within the service provider space, I'll tell you, so in terms of exposing warts, so I think, I could stand up here and say, we've got an infrastructure that can absolutely enable you to migrate a huge portion of your business and infrastructure into the cloud. We've got it well baked out. We've got it trialed. We've got a good architecture, a compelling value proposition. And then I'll tell you that part of our service provider business unit built a virtualized architecture for CMTS, which is the cable access technology. And that technology won't run on the cloud infrastructure that I'm happy to sell you. It runs on a different cloud infrastructure. So that's a sort of classic kind of left-hand, right-hand thing that I think a lot of people experience as they go through this. So where are we as an industry on the cloud journey? I'm going to use a manufacturing analogy. If you think back to the early days of Ford and the first mass production, right? The innovation there was breaking up the tasks and specializing in the specific functions of building a car. I put on the wheels, she puts in the engine, he puts in the transmission, and so on down the line. I want you to imagine that somebody who builds cars walks into that factory, looks at it, and says, I'm going to build my cars in here. And they start at one end, and they put the frame together. And then they walk the frame to the next station, and they put the engine in. And they walk the frame to the next station, and they tack on the transmission. When we look at the way cloud's being adopted, there's a lot of that kind of stuff that goes on. There's a lot of applying old processes, old organization structures to new technology. And the result of that is that all the gains that everyone's supposed to get from implementing cloud aren't realized or are sub-optimized. So from a where are we? Look, we see players at every end of the spectrum. We see Rakuten, who is basically a greenfield provider that has implemented a virtualized RAN and sort of invented their processes from the ground up to look like a web scale player, to look like a cloud native player. And they're deriving huge benefits both in terms of market agility as well as cost performance from that architecture. And we see others who I'm not going to name at the other end of the spectrum who are doing exactly what I said. They've got all the same old processes with all the new toys, and they're really not deriving much value. So I think we've got, as an industry, I think we've got a lot of work to do. And I think comments that I've heard both yesterday and today that I'd point to, this is a massive change for the organization. I think for the industry. I think this may be as big a transformation as the industry has ever experienced, to go from basically building and managing appliances to and operating appliances to a real cloud architecture. And in order to adapt to that change, you need a massive cultural shift. And you heard the providers up here talking a little bit about skill problems, organizational reorgs, process changes. But it's got to be from the very beginning of the process, from how you work with your vendors to the very end of the process in terms of how you work with your customers. And there's a huge amount of work to be done. So I think this has a long way to go. I think it's really exciting, but we've got a lot of work to do together to get there. I'll head for my seat.
Thank you very much, David. Right, so now we have Brian Ahern from Intel. Brian, come and tell us.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to take just a quick look back first at 2012. My job in Intel is to apply cloud and data center technologies to the network. Okay. So in 2012, the conversation was from CSPs to us, how come the technologies that are available to the cloud are not available to me in the network? Okay, that was the problem statement. So fast forward to where we are at the moment. So you could say on the dawn of 5G and edge infrastructure, you can now get a 5G core network built on the latest and greatest technologies that are available in the marketplace. And you can get it from the suppliers in the room. The question that we have is, so who's ready for that? And so while the CSPs have done an unbelievable job in working the supply chain over the last number of years, from tightly integrated infrastructure to multi-vendor infrastructure, great choice that has been involved in the ecosystem over the last couple of years. But with that choice, another word for choice is complexity. And one of the major challenges that we have now over the next couple of years, particularly is if we want to apply, cloud native to 5G to edge, and them all coming together with these yet to be clear services. That complexity is one of the challenges that faces us looking forward. So I would suggest that tremendous progress in the ecosystem. I think the suppliers have a great product portfolio, but what's happening, or the dynamic in the infrastructure, just think about how Beth described cloud to her. I'm pretty sure if you asked another CSP to come up and talk about what cloud meant to them, it would not be that same definition. And so that's one of the challenges that we face as suppliers is making sure that we have the right pieces together for that definition of cloud at the point in time that it's needed. Two ways to manage that complexity. One is, and this is a really important point, is that one way to manage that complexity is to pick a single vendor solution. And for many CSPs, perhaps not the ones in the room today, but a lot of that complexity is being removed because they make a specific decision that I can't handle all that complexity. I'm going to pick, still best in class, but I'm going to remove that complexity by massively reducing my amount of vendors in my system. So the other option is that we need to get serious about automation, and we're not there yet. We've got to standardize the platform infrastructure, and we've got to work up the stack to deliver that automated framework. I'll leave you with one final point, which hasn't been touched a whole lot yet, but I think we might get into it now or later. Security. I think automated, distributed, secure infrastructure is fundamental to all of us. And I feel like there isn't enough of a debate on security and how we adjust to have a multi-vendor infrastructure, great, but multi-vendor, automated, and secure. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, very much. Did Patrick Donegan pay you to say that last bit?
No.
Security stuff? No. Good. Well, thank you very much indeed. All great perspectives. The final supplier coming to the table is dare we say, a great telco debate veteran, Martin Taylor from Metaswitch. Martin, you're most welcome back.
Okay, so I want to start by just doing a sort of quick retrospective, if you like. Just remember, NFV is 7 years old now. And I think if we look back over the last 7 years, we can say, yeah, some progress was made, but it's been a little bit disappointing, if we're perfectly honest. It's been pretty hard work, and we haven't reaped the benefits that we hoped we would reap based on that white paper that the telcos published. With the benefit of hindsight, I think what we can say is this whole NFV mission, as it was described in that white paper, was lacking in ambition. It was inspired really by looking at the IT world, what was happening in the IT world. You know, you would take a mail server and you would virtualize it. And that's very much the terms in which NFV was described. It was replace a hardware appliance with a software appliance. Now, at the time, the very time that white paper was published, the hyperscalers were already out there eating telcos' lunch. Some of you may remember that KPN, the Dutch national operator, issued a profit warning because their SMS revenue had been completely stripped away by the success of WhatsApp. WhatsApp built, their first 2 or 3 years, with no more than 50 software engineers, built a service that served 200 million subscribers and scaled incredibly fast, was very fault tolerant, and so on. The NFV community, the telcos that wrote that white paper, should have taken their inspiration from WhatsApp and not from the IT world. And things might have looked very different today if that had been the case. So I think, we now have kind of learnt that as an industry. I think we understand what cloud native means. Cloud native is the way that WhatsApp was and others were able to build their systems so quickly and scale so fast and adapt so quickly. I mean, the pace of innovation of that application in the early days, when new stuff kept coming every few weeks, was just phenomenal. So that's what we need to aspire to as an industry. And the way we do that is to do stuff cloud native. Now, the challenge with cloud native, and I think we all, certainly from the supplier side, this is the really big problem. The big problem is that any significant telco network function has got thousands of features that have been accumulated over decades of telco requirements. And there's really nothing new. Remember that, we think of 5G as new. It's not really. It's the 5G core control plane is clearly an evolution of the LTE control plane. Yes, it's got service-based interfaces, but under the covers, it inherits an awful lot of that functionality. So if you're a vendor and you have an LTE, so you have an EPC product, a LTE packet core, then the way that you deliver 5G in a reasonable time frame and at reasonable budget is you just take the software you've got and you bolt some service-based interfaces onto it. And you deliver it to market. And then you say, well, it's cloud native. And the reason it's cloud native is because, well, the 3GPP architecture for 5G is cloud native. but it isn't really cloud native. It's just the old stuff, but with service-based interfaces. It doesn't have the ability to scale dynamically. It doesn't have the ability to, the operations automation piece is almost entirely missing because all this stuff is still very much script-driven. It doesn't have the concept of declarative configuration, which is one of the ways that you manage these very, very large-scale cloud-native applications. There's just a million ways in which that just simply doesn't pass the cloud-native sniff test. So the challenge the industry has to get to cloud native is to start from scratch. And the reason you need to start from scratch is that the difference in architecture between a properly cloud native application and a telco appliance is all-encompassing. Almost every aspect of the software architecture is fundamentally different. The way that you handle state, the way that you handle configuration, the decomposition into microservices, the way that you scale. There's just you just can't get there from here, and we understand this as well as anyone because we have both new applications that were written from the ground up to run in the cloud, like our IMS core, and we've got much older applications like our Unified Communications TAS, which has been in development for 20 years, and we know how absolutely impossible it is to take that application and truly turn it into a cloud-native application. So fundamentally, we've got to overcome this discontinuity somehow, and the way we need to do this is recognize that it is a discontinuity, that we do need to encourage people to start from scratch, write new stuff, build it up, and I think, to us, the entry point for this is around some of the 5G use cases other than enhanced mobile broadband. Okay, enhanced mobile broadband inherits all of the same service requirements as legacy LTE. It's massively complex. But there's a lot of kind of greenfield use cases around 5G, around IoT, around edge computing, and those kinds of things, where I think a brand new approach can be justified. So the challenge to the telcos is, first of all, get your procurement process in a state which is kind of suitable for bringing this kind of thing on. Because if you just go out to an RFP, then all that happens is people put a tick in as many boxes as they think they can pass the red face test on, and then they'll slam you later for change requests. But you won't really learn whether that vendor can deliver the cloud native thing until you've actually brought them into the lab and you've actually played with their stuff. Because all of you who have tried to get cloud applications running will know that there's all sorts of devils in all sorts of details. So think in terms of procurement as a building partnership between the telco and supplier, that this happens in the labs, this happens with prototyping, happens with proofs of concept that you take forward over a period of time. And think in terms of stripping away as many legacy requirements as you can so that we don't have to rebuild the entirety of every network function in order to get to the cloud native world. That is the only way we're really going to get to this cloud native nirvana. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. So we're going to move on to the debate motion here, and the motion is cloudification is at least a 5-year journey for the CSPs. And I am speaking for this motion, and Chris is speaking against it. So I'm going first. I want to tell you, in support of the motion, I want to tell you a story about my dysfunctional family. About 18 months ago, we needed a new central heating boiler. And so we had the boiler installed by the plumber. And the plumber said, you should really have one of these Nest thermostats. Because you can control it with an app, and it's amazing. And I wasn't there at the time, so my wife is the key decision maker. My wife, by the way, is very smart, works in technology, right? So she's not an idiot. But she decided that, yes, she was going to take the Nest thermostat, which is about this big. It's a sort of circular thing about this big. But she didn't like the way it looked, and so she didn't want to have it visible anywhere in the house. So she put it in the cupboard where the boiler is, right? So it's literally this far from the central heating boiler. So that kind of screws up the model for a start, right? Because it's reading, it's the temperature that the thermostat is reading is not the temperature it's in the rest of the house, right? So you might want the temperature in the house to be, let's say, 20 degrees. The central heating won't come on because the thermostat thinks it's like 28 degrees because it's sitting right next to the boiler, right? So we've broken the business model at the very first hurdle. The next thing that happens is that every member of our family gets the Nest app.
Graham, we're a bit short of time, all right?
No, okay, let me just finish.
I know this is therapy.
Every member of the family gets the Nest app on the iPhone, right? Then we lose the password, okay? So now what's happened is that my son has forgotten that you can actually go upstairs to change the control on the thermostat, just like you used to do in the old days with the old central heating boiler. So he just sits there in the cold, right? Because he can't be bothered to go upstairs. So we've implemented a technology, but we haven't got the processes and the people lined up behind that technology. And that is exactly the problem that telcos are facing with the cloud, okay? As we heard earlier, the technology is there, right, in many aspects, but the whole journey involves understanding all the processes and the people involved. And so I urge you, that is a very long process, and I urge you, ladies and gentlemen, to support the motion. Thank you very much.
Graham, you are a genius. There's no doubt about it. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the thing we have to consider here, and this goes back to many things we've heard all the way through, not just the comments from the CSP telcos themselves and also from the suppliers here, but actually it isn't a journey. You know, when researching this topic, we find many journeys within the different CSPs, within different opcos, at the group level. And in fact, if you think about it, we talk about the journey to cloud native. Well, it's a bit like that star that I mentioned over the stable somewhere in the Middle East, you know? Actually, we think it's there, that's why we want to go. But actually, when we get there, we realize actually we want to go back to where we came from and start all over again. So actually, there is no end point in this journey. So you know, what we therefore need to focus on, as you heard from the telcos on the panel earlier, is actually where can we get those wins? Where can we get the short-term areas in which the cloudification of that piece of the puzzle gets us some wins? Now, for those we had the conversation before lunch, a question about the lady with 9 phone calls to the CSP. Actually, increasingly, we're now doing that through that cloud-native app on our devices, and frankly, we get a lot more sense out of that app than we do out of a lot of people that we talk to in the contact centres. But that's where we're just beginning to scratch the surface. I think, Martin, you used the term scratch there. I think we are beginning to scratch the surface of this, and by going through not one enormous journey, because we know those major transformations inevitably fail, because not everybody's on board and that end goal is changing. So actually, by taking step by step, initially with those things that touch the customer, because the customer, to your point, Graham, if you'd actually done the chat line with the Nest thermostat thing in the first place, you'd have been much better off. It's those little steps that get us to that benefit in the first place. So the journey to cloud is not one journey. It's many different journeys, different parts of the organization, whether it's through that app or on your device, or whether it's indeed, as we've seen from many organizations, leveraging services offered by people like Salesforce, certainly starting on the CRM side, but more broadly now. And then, of course, working with those hyperscalers. Everybody on the panel previously, and now the suppliers here, has mentioned this need for a change in the partnership model, in the relationship that we have between the telcos, their suppliers, and indeed between the different sorts of suppliers. So ladies and gentlemen, I would ask you to actually vote against the motion.
Okay.
Any more comments? So we had a few questions from earlier. I don't really want to go back. The gentleman from Ericsson, do you want to restate your question? Or?
We've got one here first.
Oh, sorry, go on then, Ross, you're in charge. Yep.
Hi, Rabi, Vodafone Group. So we heard how telcos need to adapt their methodologies, their process, their procurement to be cloud ready or to be ready to consume cloud. But do you really think that our TEM and vendors are ready to provide that technology? And how long will it take them to be able to give us cloud native applications in true sense?
How long? So I think we began. So can I go back?
Avishai is going to...
Go on, Avishai.
Yeah, so obviously we are ready. So, but I think that you've heard here from everyone on stage that we're also in a journey ourselves. So I think that some of the stuff is ready to be used immediately. Some of it create immediate impact on the daily life of yourself and your customers. And if it's up to the process or the journey you need to take, I think that yes, you can start to enjoy many of the good things that cloud native technology brings today. You don't need to wait.
So just to add, look, from a Cisco standpoint, I would say we've got a lot of the infrastructure, a lot of the tools, a lot of the capabilities are required, and a lot of it is out there in production at scale in the marketplace, at Rakuten, at T-Mobile, at other places around the market, at Azure, et cetera. So, a lot of it's there. Is all of it there? No. There's lots to be done, and we're working on not just from a process and partnership standpoint, we're working from our side, not just on the technology, not just on the software architecture, not just on separating software from hardware, which is part of this process, but also on the business models that work for both of us to match that. So there's lots of work to be done, but in support of Chris's point that there's lots of value to capture in the short term if we're aggressive, there's lots of technology there to enable that.
Great. Yep. Super. Yes, Daniel.
And then after this, can we then go back to Beth and Marcus and Franz and Vittorio and get their comments on the duration of the journey?
Sure.
Yeah, so since we've established that the BSS, OSS network and enterprise services domains are so distinct and very, very different, what in your mind is the right balance between a strategy that drives cloudification, cloud native throughout the organization and leaving those domains to develop according to the requirements of the leaders of those specific domains?
Blimey, that's a loaded question, Patrick.
Is it?
Yeah. Anyone like to take that? So should it be driven by the fact that we can cloudify, or should it be driven by the people with the specialist knowledge within those particular areas?
So I'll take a stab, and then people can throw things at me. Maybe the big box right there. So I think this is, as I said before, I think this has to be driven from the top down, and I think it needs to be a relatively broad corporate-wide mandate. I think that we're dealing with the concept of sort of minimum efficient scale, that if you try to do this in too small a pocket of the company, the DNA of the rest of the organization, the antibodies of the rest of the organization will sort of attack that and kill it, right? Or kill the benefit, right? The technology might work, but the benefit won't be captured. So I think you need to target it and sequence it, but you need to drive it broadly and aggressively from the get-go. And I think trying to just do a dip your toe in the water type of approach is just going to.
So the Donovan approach, basically.
Yeah, but I'll add to it. I think that eventually it goes into the individuals. So I agree with the fact that you need the sponsorship of the leadership, but eventually it will go to the people that will drive it and will take it to the next level. So even you don't want to be in a situation that only management embrace it. You want to be in kind of in a mode that management embrace it, and then you have the people that can drive it to the next level, and then you can drive the benefits, and you have a win-win situation. Because you do need the people to take it further. Management can, there is a limit also to managers.
Yeah,
there are some dangers in this top-down approach. I mean, I've heard it said from someone who worked from one of the big tier ones in the States that the statement from the top that this is strategic, this is the entire direction of the company, meant that every single engineer in that company who had any ambition at all felt that they had to jump in there, right? And just all these people who really didn't have a clue piled in. And they brought with them all their sort of telco sensibilities, and they invented all sorts of requirements that were really sort of non-requirements, which meant that they then drove someone to take OpenStack and massively modify it all over the place. And at the end of the day, they learned their lesson, I think.
I would add that. I mean, I think when you're in a large company, you got to have some level of tops-down direction. You got to, and that I have to say I support that point. But in addition, if you want to move fast, you got to get a couple of people with you and go. And that's the same whether you're a small company or a larger company like ours. I feel in this industry right now, the wish to get everyone together so we can all row at the same time in the same boat to a destination that we haven't really even defined is just really not going to work out too good for us.
Can we go to Beth and Marcus and Franz and Vittorio and have a sort of timeline? Beth, you know?
Yeah, just.
Timeline, that's an interesting question. So I would say we started on this journey probably about 5 years ago. We were a little late to the game, I'd say. One of our major competitors was about a year and a half, 2 years ahead of us. I think that ended up not hurting us in the end because we were able to build on, OpenStack was a little less mature than it could have been when our competitors jumped into it, and then we kind of waited and we got some advantages to that. I think it's kind of an ongoing journey. I would say we're probably about 80% there. So,
Thank you, Beth.
there you go.
Super. Thank you.
I don't know who's nearest, but if any of the Marcus or Franz or Vittorio.
Sorry, I need to catch a train. So,
Okay.
so from three perspective, as I said, for me it depends where you start counting, because if you consider start the clock when you start planning for it, then we are probably in 3.5 to 4 years now into the program, and because of all the procurement work took about a year, even more, because we need to procure data center space, transmission, dark fiber, applications, infrastructure. So this is a massive piece of work. If you start the clock from where you start the design for it, then it's probably we are in like 2.5 years into it. What we have achieved so far is we have virtualized the network, EPC, IMS, it's all virtualized. But we are still in the process of ensuring stability and resilience and performance parity with the legacy network. So once we have proved that, then our operations people will be happy to take the network under their control and fully migrate the traffic. So this is just about virtualization. If you're talking about cloud native, then that will be the next challenge, because and that's a big challenge because, as Martin said earlier, we don't really want to put another like monolithic application onto containers, because it doesn't make sense. The application need to be properly cloud native, so they need to be microservices based, they need to run on containers, and they need to be stateless. And in order to do that, you not only need to deploy the container support, but you need a number of platform type of software, mainly open source, to manage this type of environment. And that's very difficult, because it's not vendor software, it's mainly open source software, and somebody need to put it all together and manage it. And that's not an easy challenge, I think.
Thank you very much.
5 years is...
And Marcus is standing right behind you, so if you give him the
Yes,
mic. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it really depends a bit on what you talk about. I think in the mobile core, 5G core, I mean, this is... Virtualization is done, cloudification is going along. In other areas, things are going along as well, where I think sort of really the next step is, as long as sort of like control management topics and so on, the things are going on. If you really go out into the pure network, say pure in the sense of the hardware near network, what we have today, I think there it will take much longer. There's this whole discussion on disaggregating all this functionality. So if you take it out of a box, you need to sort of put it together in another way, in a more cloud-native way. And that takes its time. The legacy implementation of it are not ready. and so on and so forth. I think there we have a quite a long time to go.
Thank you, Marcus. Okay. Is Franz still with us? Or?
Look at that. Yes, he is. Oh, my word, what a throw. What a throw. There you go.
Didn't hit Father Christmas.
It doesn't break, does it? No.
No.
This is resilient. That's good. Telco design. Yeah, I think I very much agree. I mean, as our network is not built from one coherent piece, but put together from many different pieces which develop on different speeds, which have different backgrounds, certain parts will arrive rather soon. Most obvious one, as we heard multiple times, as it looks today, is likely 5G core, because this is rewritten as far as we can see from all the suppliers. So this will be close to target from the beginning. But there are many other things which will develop much slower. Yeah, and in Europe we are in a situation we will at least keep one of our legacy networks, 2G, 3G, for quite some time, because we have plenty of devices out there which you don't want to replace easily, and I'm not sure if we will ever see a fully cloudified 2G or 3G network. I have some doubts that this is easily, and it's also not commercially attractive to suppliers. Not even talking about some of the real nice legacy pieces in fixed access. So if you ask when do I see the whole network being fully cloud and automated and stuff, then I'm not sure if it will be still a 22x year number. But as I said, other things we will see in the next 1, 2, 3 years. Others is a 5 years plus thing. So, and in that sense, I agree with you. It's not one single journey.
Thank you.
There are many different ways, and the challenge is everything needs to come together at one point in time, and that will be the real challenge to make that happen.
Great. Graham, we're eating into the break a little bit, and we are tight for the end deadline. But do we?
I reckon we have time for one more question.
Come on.
There we go, down there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. One of the attributes of we always hear cloud native about the technology here. One of the attributes is also the rapid service creation and disappearing. My Google on the left, they kill many services like Nest. And I don't see that the parallel is incredible, because Orange stopped the Telegram service last year. So like the speed of which you create and also remove services when they don't work is another challenge to me, and a challenge also to the whole industry and ecosystem, because suppliers spend 2 years on an RFP and they expect 15, 20 years being deployed and the revenues. If you move that and get that attributes also, which drives the business, you will have to be prepared for building new services, a lot of them, and remove a lot of them too.
Sure. Yep. Good point.
Point.
Mr. Parsons?
Shall we take a vote?
Come on down.
Move to the vote.
Please.
Thank you. Right.
And you've got to remind people about their evaluation forms.
Thank you.
Yeah. Shall I remind you about that?
You remind me about that later and I'll remember. Excellent. Thanks very much to the panellists, and we'll now move to the vote. But just before I do, I must say, as a Scottish person myself, I have to take my hat off to Graham for coming up with what's perhaps the greatest and most elongated excuse for saving money in your central heat and leaving your poor family out in the cold. And his washing machines all over it on Twitter. Now, so you know the format. Those in favour of the motion, put the green panel to the front. Those against, put the red panel to the front. Vote now, please. Oh, wow, that is overwhelmingly in favour of the motion. There's not very many against it at all. I would put that 3/4 to 1/4.
Well
so
done.
the motion's carried.
Thank you very much.